Hello again, YouTube. It's me, Maester Mike, and I'm back for my next review of the Star Wars movies. This time, I'm talking about the Phantom Menace. I've watched the original trilogy, and I fell in love with them all over again, and now I'm going on to the prequel trilogy. I feel like I should have watched it the other way around because I would have gotten through the weaker movies first before going on to the much better and more universally loved ones. But that's all on me, and I have no one else to blame but myself. So this is my review on the Phantom Menace. So in this movie, it's around 30 or so years before the original trilogy, I think. The movies never really convey the passage of time very well, in my opinion. Anyway, the Jedi are powerful. Well, the Jedi are around, and the Republic rules the galaxy. And the conflict in this movie is that there's this trade federation that's having these disputes with the peaceful planet of Naboo, and so there have been negotiations that haven't been going well between these two factions, and so the Trade Federation has set up this whole blockade of these space stations around the planet, and to try to gain the upper hand on Naboo so that they can get them more power. The two Jedi, a younger Obi-Wan Kenobi and his Jedi Master, or Qui-Gon Jinn, a more experienced and more well-versed Jedi, are posing as ambassadors to try to figure out the reasons for this whole thing. And Qui-Gon seems to sense that there's something more sinister going on with this trade dispute. They go down into the planet to rescue the Queen and to get them to the capital of the Republic called Coruscant. And on their travels, they first stop on Tatooine, where they meet a young boy named Anakin Skywalker, who seems to have a very strong connection to the Force, as Qui-Gon seems to notice. Yeah, and the Jedi are aware that there may be a resurgence of the Sith, which hasn't been around for over 1,000 years. So they have to get to the bottom of this mystery before before a huge war breaks out. So that's essentially the Phantom Menace. I have a weird connection with this movie. I don't think I really need to explain the backlash this movie received, do I? This movie, when it came out, people were mixed on this movie. Some people liked it, some people didn't, but then opinions seemed to sour over time more towards the negative. That was kind of redundant, but whatever. Yeah, this is one of the most divisive movies in the entire Star Wars canon. It used to be until some other movies more recently have come out, but we'll get to that when we get to that. I'm really curious to see what I personally think about that. Sorry, I don't mean to be discussing. Sort of getting over a little bit of a cold. Most people really hated The Phantom Menace. Me personally, this was the movie that I watched the most out of any of the Star Wars movies. There's something about it that I really just liked. I don't know what it is about it, but I just like this movie a whole lot. I think it was mostly because of the fun action that they had in it. One thing I really loved doing as a kid was I always liked watching the action scenes, and I liked acting out as the Jedi when they were fighting in the duels. It's like acting out the firefights and the lightsaber battles. It was just something fun. This movie means a lot to my childhood. It was one of my favorites growing up, and it always really bummed me out and also bugged me just how hated this movie was. Like, people can have opinions, but they were just like, I don't really mind it that people don't like it, but you know how people are when it talks about opinions on certain things. They can be very vitriolic and just get so up in arms and so angry about certain things that really don't matter in the grand scheme of things. Like, so what if this movie sucks? It's just a movie, but yeah, the backlash towards the prequels and the overhype with the originals just really turned me off. As I said, I think I said that in my review of A New Hope, but yeah, I've always had a soft connection with The Phantom Menace myself, and I kind of just blocked out all criticism. Sorry if I'm reaching around, I'm just playing with stuff. I'm kind of fidgety, but yeah, Phantom Menace. Yeah, and now that I've watched it with a more adult perspective, I can now tell you what I personally think about it. This movie is kind of a guilty pleasure for me. I still really like it, but I can definitely acknowledge a lot of the faults that this film has. But there's also a lot of good stuff I think that a lot of people overlook. So there are things that I like. I have some notes that I wrote down, so let me say things that I like. I like seeing, well, one thing I like seeing is seeing the universe at a much different time. There's the technology is different. You see a lot of different ships and like locales, the planets of Naboo. I really like the planet of Coruscant. That place is really cool, especially when you first see it in the stars. It looks like a bunch of stars itself. The whole planet is a giant city, and it looks really cool when you first see it in space. There's also, I like seeing this movie with its more different technological aspects. A lot of people really didn't like it that this film over relied on CGI, but well, it's kind of. I think I'm more okay with this movie CGI than with certain special editions of the original trilogy, where George Lucas put in really awkward and out of place CGI effects that for these older movies where it doesn't really belong. I think this movie isn't. Well, definitely the CGI doesn't hold up as well as it would if it were made nowadays. I think it has a lot of cool. It looks pretty. It's pretty ambitious, and there's a lot of cool other places. Oh yeah, the Gungan city is also really cool. This underwater city. It just looks really cool. And while there are definitely some characters that have a lot of controversy behind them, there are some good characters that I really like. Like, this movie has one of my favorite Star Wars characters in Qui-Gon Jinn. He's Obi-Wan's Jedi Master, and I really like Qui-Gon Jinn. He's always one of my favorite characters. I think it's probably due to Liam Neeson who just really owns his. I think Liam Neeson does well as Qui-Gon. He's very humble. He's very calm. He's very much attuned to the Force. He's just a very strong and competent Jedi, and there's just something about him that I always wanted to be. He's always at peace. He knows how to be in control. He's just a very cool guy that I always liked. And then there's also Darth Maul, who, while definitely is kind of a shame that he gets killed off in just this. He's only introduced in this one movie, and he's killed off as soon as the conflict ends. It would have been nice to see him in more of the movies, but I think he's a really cool. He's got a cool design with his face. Is the red parts of his face, is that face paint, or is that just the way his body looks? I never know. I think that's actually just his natural body colors, but he's got a really intimidating design. His ferocity and his look and his dual-bladed lightsaber, that was always one of my favorite things of this whole film. Growing up, I always wanted to be a Jedi that had a dual-bladed green lightsaber that could separate into two separate lightsabers. That was always a fantasy that I always liked to have. Darth Maul is a cool villain, and I'll say this right now: Darth Maul is a better character than Boba Fett. At least Darth Maul does something. He puts up a good fight against two experienced Jedi. Well, one experienced Jedi and one Padawan. And he managed to kill the more experienced Jedi, so that's 1 point over Boba Fett, 2 points over Boba Fett. So that may get me. I wonder if that will get me in some trouble. Not that anyone will really notice these videos. Yeah. Other things I really like about this movie, the action. Just as I said before, I love the action. The duel between Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul. There's some. As well as Obi-Wan, who's the choreography with all the lightsaber duels with the battle droids, and just the choreography with the lightsaber duels seems a lot more advanced and more impressive in this movie than it ever did in the original trilogy. Not that they were terrible, sans the original horrible fight from A New Hope, but they always seem to have they're always kind of amateurish in fighting techniques. Like, this movie has a lot bigger budget than the original trilogy, so I feel like they put a lot of time and effort into making the choreography really awesome. And it also has one of my personal favorite moments of the whole series, like the pod race, Anakin's pod race. I think that whole sequence is really awesome and really fun, and It's really fast and really deadly and really intense. It's a very fun scene in my opinion. And of course, say what you will about the movie, but one thing that also can't be taken away is the music. This movie has some of the best music in Star Wars history, with the duel of the fates, the fight between the good Jedi and the Sith. What more can be said about the song "The Duel of the Fates"? Even if you hate the movie, you can't take away that song is just freaking awesome. Other things I never really. It's funny. I had a lot of patience for this movie because there's a lot of slow parts, but I kind of admire seeing when they get to Coruscant, we see the beginnings of Palpatine and his plans to rise through the ranks. We see that at least from their ambition, the politics in Coruscant and the Republic are very corrupt and there's all sorts of bureaucracy and all sorts of corruption, and nothing's ever getting done. It's just a bunch of pointless politics that kind of seemingly like nowadays, and Palpatine's wanting to change that. He's able to turn people against the current chancellor and able to make himself the chancellor through their own political structure. You're just seeing him laying the groundwork for what will eventually become his ways of getting into power to become the emperor. So yeah, it's nice to see him starting out. He's just very simple. Palpatine as just a normal. Palpatine is acting like a normal chancellor. He seems like he's very wise and smart, but he's secretly planning for something much more sinister. I hope I'm making sense. One thing I really like about this movie, say about this what you will, say what you want about the movie, but at least it tells an original story. It's not like recycling everything from the original trilogy, like what Disney has unfortunately done. We'll get to that when we get to that, but at least it's presenting a new conflict with new characters and new factions and showing new locales that we've never seen from this universe, and it all feels like it's a natural part of the whole saga. So yeah, I have a very soft spot for this movie, but I can't really talk about this movie without any of the very major problems. Or specifically one major problem. Pretty much the biggest problem that everyone has is, who it is, Jar Jar Binks. He's this creature called a Gungan. He's this sort of amphibian type creature with long ears. I don't need to explain Jar Jar. He's the comic relief of this movie, and boy, they did not really handle him very well. They did not handle him well at all. Although I kind of have a soft spot because I liked him as a kid, but I can definitely see with his obnoxious voice and his antics his cartoony slapstick antics that just don't really gel well with everything else. Everything's very serious, and he's just a class clown that just trying to make people laugh or entertain him, and it just never really works for everyone. Although I feel like people overhate him a little bit too much. I can see why people say he's the worst character in Star Wars, but to say he's the worst character, some people have said he's the worst character in movies, or he's their most hated character of all time. I don't think I'd go that far. Definitely a weak spot, but I don't know. I kind of still have a soft spot for him, even though kind of like the Ewoks from the Return of the Jedi. This movie has a pretty poor way of handling humor. What made the original trilogy work so well is just the camaraderie with all the characters, with Luke, Han, Leia, the droids, Chewie. They all worked so well to each other. They had such a good chemistry with one another, and something that the prequel trilogy never really handled very well was the chemistry between the characters, especially since the cast was changing throughout each movie. It's not as small, it's not as contained as the original trilogy was. And I feel like they cut off some scenes too short before they could have any. They should have had more banter or had a better director in charge. George Lucas is not very good at directing actors, specifically in regards to young Anakin. So the second most hated part of this movie was, unfortunately, the kid who played Anakin, Jake Lloyd. I feel bad for him. He got such a bad rap. Obviously, he wasn't very experienced as an actor. Most kid actors aren't, but they really needed a better actor. And it's not just Jake Lloyd. I feel a lot of people ignore Natalie Portman and also the Queen, like Keira Knightley. That's something I find weird. I never knew that Keira Knightley was in this movie until years later, but Padme and Queen Amidala are very flat and lifeless. They really needed a much better actor in charge, or a much better director for these people, especially when it got to the trial scene. They definitely needed someone competent, because a few good men, that scene ain't. Yeah. Poor Jake Lloyd. Everyone just hated him for so long, and while I understand that he was not the best actor, I mean, he was just a kid. People ragged on him for so long, and it's just sad. I just feel sad that he got such a bad rap. What this movie really needed was someone who really knew how to work with kid actors, like the Duffer Brothers from Stranger Things. Those kids are very well handled. They act very, very fantastically, and there are plenty of other. And kids can act well if you have the right talent, but yeah, Jar Jar and young Anakin are definitely the flaws of this movie. Although I don't think he's the worst kid actor I've ever seen. He's definitely kind of goofy and silly, but I feel like I've seen worse kid actors on like Disney Channel sitcoms, and personally I think the kid actors from, if you ask me, some of the worst kid actors that I've seen were probably from M. Night Shyamalan's The Last Airbender. Those kids just sucked. I don't mean to rag on them, but that's just me. And I don't think everything with everything with Anakin was bad. There's some scenes that I really like with this movie that no one ever talks about. Like, I really like the connection with him and his mother. There's a very nice, simple motherly bond, mother and son bond that Anakin and his mother Shmi have. And I always felt really sad when he has to leave her on Tatooine. It always felt real, kind of real. Like, you don't want to see him leave the one person he loves more than anything in the world, but he has to go on because Anakin has a destiny with the Jedi. I always liked that scene. I realized it after watching this movie again that it's a very nice moment that no one ever talks about. They always talk about the bad, but they never talk about the good. Though the bad definitely stands out in this movie a lot more than the others. And then there's the aspect of the midichlorians, which people don't like. So in the old movies, they talk about the Force in sort of this like spiritualistic, transcendental aspect. It's like all around us. It's a life force that binds all people together. But in this movie, they explain the Force as being this sort of, that we can add and analyze it with these things called midichlorians, with these little DNA things that are inside of us. And I've been a little bit mixed on that. Like, I feel like it's not as bad as people make it out to be, although I can't understand why people don't like it, because it takes away kind of from the mystery of the Force. It's like this supernatural being supernatural entity or whatever that can't really be properly explained. But this movie has sort of like a scientific explanation for what the Force is and how you can identify someone with it. And I know that George Lucas had originally planned on doing something like that a long time ago, back when he first was creating Star Wars, but it never came out to anything until this movie. I'm kind of mixed on it. On one point, it does take away from the mystery, but of what the Force is. It's like something that you can't really explain, or it's just something that's there that gives all life in the galaxy. It gives them all power, and like it binds everything together. But at the same time, with the Jedi in their prime, I feel like they could scientifically analyze what the Force is and what makes someone strong in it. I feel like they could theoretically know something about that, but I don't know. They definitely should have dealt with that better. And personally, most of those things I don't really mind too much, but the thing that I find the most irritating about this movie is something that they always talk about with the people of Naboo. Have you ever noticed how people like Padme or the Queen, like her stand-in for the Queen, anyone, whenever they talk about Naboo, they're always talking about how the citizens are suffering and dying with the Trade Federation blocking out their routes, and how they don't ever show anything to justify that. It's a very bad example of telling instead of showing, and this is a film and that's a big no-no. You shouldn't. If you want to show the people of Naboo suffering under the Trade Federation's horrible regulations, you really have to show it. I don't know if that would have been too dark for this movie, but definitely would have been something to possibly balance out the over-the-top antics from Jar Jar. Yeah, that was one thing that always bugged me. They always are telling it that people are dying, but we never see anything of it to actually justify it, and it just bugs me. Like, if just one scene, I don't know if there's any deleted scenes that show it, but they really should have had something to actually make it to understand the plight of the people. Yeah, but yeah, those are the faults that I can think of. I understand why people don't like this movie now as I'm an adult, but I have a very big soft spot for this film. It means a lot for my childhood, and even if I can realize those faults are a lot more obvious now, that still can't take away from my overall enjoyment of this movie when I watched it when I was younger. Probably won't watch this as much as I will the original trilogy, but I still have a lot of fond memories for it, and that, I think, is what, at the end of the day, matters to me the most. I still have fond memories of this movie, and yeah, I still have a soft spot. It's a guilty pleasure. It's kind of like how I feel about certain other things, like certain video games, like, say, Sonic Adventure 1 or Donkey Kong 64, both of which coincidentally came out the exact same year as The Phantom Menace. Yeah, I understand the faults of those games, but I still love them, and I can still have a lot of fun playing them, even if I'm much more aware of their faults now as an adult. Yeah, I can't really say The Phantom Menace is... Yeah, I definitely cannot say The Phantom Menace is better than any of the original trilogy movies now, but it's still a very fun movie that I have fond memories of. I don't think I'll have the same opinions on the Attack of the Clones, although we'll get to that next time. So, yeah, those are my thoughts. I hope my rambling isn't very confusing for you all, and that you're understanding my points, but those are my thoughts on The Phantom Menace. It's definitely a big, flawed movie, but it still has a lot of charm for me, and I still will probably watch it many other times in the future. So those are my thoughts. Take care, people, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.